He pointed his finger right in her face, his voice dripping with arrogance. Listen to me and listen carefully. I don't care who you think you are or how much you think you paid for that ticket. My plane, my rules. Turn around right now or I'll order security to drag you off the tarmac. Captain Richard Sterling thought they were clearing space for an important VIP, asserting his superiority over the woman in the faded hoodie who didn't look like she belonged in first class. He had no idea that the woman he was shouting at was not just any passenger. She was the one who signed his paychecks, and she was about to teach him a lesson that would cost him everything. Rain drummed against the glass walls of Terminal 4 at John F. Kennedy International Airport, creating a grey rhythmic backdrop for the chaos inside. For Elena Vance, the sound was almost soothing, white noise that drowned out the endless stream of business calls, mergers, and board meetings that had consumed her life for the past 6 months. Elena adjusted her loose charcoal grey hoodie, pulling the sleeves over her palms. To any passerby, she looked like a tired college student or perhaps an exhausted traveler trying to catch a standby flight home. She wore no makeup, her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her sneakers were worn from a week of travel. There were no flashy diamonds on her fingers, no loud designer logos on her canvas tote. She liked it that way. In reality, Elena Vance was the majority shareholder and CEO of Vance Global, a conglomerate with tentacles in technology, freight, and, for the past 3 weeks, aviation. She had quietly acquired the struggling Meridian Air with the intention of refreshing its image. Today was her first field test. A secret flight on Meridian's flagship route from New York to London. She wanted to experience the service through a customer's eyes, without the red carpet that usually rolled out the moment anyone recognized her name. She glanced at her boarding pass. Seat 1A, first class. Finally, she whispered, walking toward the gate. The gate agent, a young woman who looked like she had just finished a double shift, barely looked up as she scanned Elena's pass. The machine beeped green. Elena walked down the jet bridge. The cool tunnel air hit her face. She was looking forward to a glass of champagne, a warm blanket, and 7 hours of absolute silence. But the moment she stepped onto the plane, the atmosphere changed. The flight attendant at the door, name tag reading Jessica, flashed a tight, rehearsed smile that never reached her eyes. Her gaze slid over Elena's hoodie and scuffed sneakers, lingering a second too long on the frayed hem of her jeans. Boarding pass, Jessica asked in a clipped tone, even though Elena had just been scanned at the gate. Elena handed it over silently. Jessica narrowed her eyes at the ticket, then back at Elena. Seat 1A. Are you sure? That's what it says on the ticket, Elena answered calmly, taking the stub back. Fine, left side. Jessica waved vaguely and immediately turned her attention to the passenger behind Elena, a man in a tailored suit. Her voice instantly became a purr. Welcome aboard, sir. Let me take your coat. Right this way, please. Elena suppressed a sigh and found her seat. The first-class cabin of the Meridian 777 was impressive. Sleek leather pods, huge entertainment screens, and gold-trimmed finishes. She stowed her canvas bag and settled into the soft leather seat 1A. She closed her eyes, ready to switch off. Excuse me. The voice was sharp and intrusive. Elena opened her eyes. Jessica stood over her, arms folded across her uniform, expression awkward but determined. There's been a complication, Jessica said. We have a small seating overlap. I need to see your boarding pass again. Elena frowned but pulled the stub from her pocket. I don't understand how there can be an overlap. I booked this seat 2 weeks ago. Jessica barely glanced at the paper. Yes, unfortunately our system is showing a double booking on seat 1A, and since a priority platinum member will be boarding shortly, protocol requires us to give preference to his reservation. Elena straightened. Priority platinum? I paid full price for this ticket and I'm already sitting here. I understand, Jessica said, her voice dripping with condescension, but the other passenger is a very important Meridian client. We have seats available in Economy Plus with extra legroom. It's quite comfortable. You want me to move out of the first class I paid for into economy because someone important is coming? Elena asked. Her voice was even but firm. That's not how contracts work. I have a ticket. Jessica let out a theatrical sigh as if Elena were being unreasonably stubborn. Please don't make a scene. It's standard procedure. It is not standard procedure to downgrade a paying passenger who is already seated because of a late booking, Elena countered. I'm right here. Jessica's face flushed. She pressed her earpiece. Captain, we have a situation in first class. Seat 1A is refusing to cooperate. Elena watched her with disbelief. Last week during the acquisition she had read Meridian Air's operations manual cover to cover. There was absolutely no policy allowing this. In fact, it was expressly forbidden to move seated passengers without substantial compensation of thousands of dollars and voluntary consent. A moment later the cockpit door opened. Captain Richard Sterling stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver streaks in his hair and a jaw like it had been carved from granite. He wore his uniform with the pride of a general. 4 gold stripes gleamed on his shoulders. He radiated authority, but also palpable arrogance. He walked to seat 1A, his heavy boots thudding dully on the carpet. First he looked at Elena, then at Jessica. "What's the problem?" Sterling asked, his deep baritone carrying through the quiet cabin. "She won't move, Captain," Jessica said accusingly, pointing at Elena. "I explained the reservation conflict with Mr. Harrington, but she refuses to give up the seat." Sterling finally turned his gaze to Elena. His eyes were cold and dismissive. He saw the hoodie. He saw the messy hair. He saw nobody. "Miss," Sterling said, skipping the pleasantries, "we have a flight to operate. I don't have time for games. Take your bag and follow the flight attendant to row 24. Elena looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Captain Sterling," she read from his name tag. "I do have a ticket for this seat." "I think you don't understand." Sterling leaned in, invading her personal space. "This is not a negotiation. This is my aircraft. I decide who flies and where they sit. You can go to row 24, or I can call airport security to remove you from the plane. Your choice." Elena felt heat rising to her cheeks, not embarrassment, but a smoldering rage she hadn't felt in years. She had built her empire by outplaying men like Sterling, men who believed a loud voice and a loud title replaced competence and respect. On what grounds? Elena asked calmly. "I have not caused any disturbance. I am not intoxicated. I have a valid ticket. If you remove me, you will violate federal aviation regulations and Meridian Air's own contract of carriage, Section 4, Paragraph 2. Sterling blinked, momentarily thrown by her precise citation of the rules, but his ego quickly covered the doubt. He gave a dry, mocking chuckle. "Lawyer," he scoffed, glancing at Jessica. "We've got a self-taught attorney on board. Listen, sweetheart, quoting regulations doesn't change reality. The reality is that Mr. Charles Harrington will board this aircraft in 3 minutes. Mr. Harrington is a personal friend of the airline's regional director. He needs privacy. He needs this seat. And you, on the other hand," he looked her up and down with open contempt, "look like you scraped your savings together for a lucky upgrade. Sit in economy. Spare yourself the embarrassment." "It wasn't an upgrade," Elena said in an icy tone. "I don't care," Sterling cut her off. "Last chance." At that moment the noise at the front of the cabin grew louder. A man burst through the jet bridge, accompanied by 2 assistants carrying garment bags. Charles Harrington was the embodiment of everything Elena despised in the corporate world. He was in his 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than most cars, his face flushed with excess whiskey and lack of patience. He held a phone to his ear, barking orders. "I don't care about the supply chain. Just fire them if they can't deliver. Get rid of them," Harrington shouted into the phone. He ended the call and scanned the cabin. He stopped when he saw Sterling by seat 1A. "Richard," Harrington boomed, forcing a fake, hearty smile onto his face. "Good to see you, Captain. I hope you're ready to get us to London ahead of schedule. I have a table booked at the Shard. Mr. Harrington," Sterling's tone changed instantly, obsequious, almost bowing. "Always a pleasure. We are just resolving a small organizational issue." Harrington looked down at Elena, his lip curling. "This is the issue. She's in my seat." "She's just leaving," Sterling said, shooting Elena a look that promised payback if she spoke. Harrington laughed with a wet, unpleasant sound. "Well, come on, hurry up. I need to review documents and get rid of that." He waved a hand at Elena's hoodie. "It smells like the subway in here." The other first-class passengers were now watching, some uncomfortable and buried in magazines, others irritated by the delay. No one intervened. Elena looked at Harrington, then at Sterling. She understood that physical resistance would only result in her being dragged off the plane in handcuffs. That did not serve her goals. She needed to see how deep the rot went. She needed to see exactly how Captain Sterling treated people he considered beneath him when he thought no one important was watching. She stood up slowly. "Fine," Elena said, her voice quiet but carrying a weight that made Jessica flinch slightly. "I'll move." Sterling grinned, folding his arms. "Smart girl. Jessica, take her bag." "I can manage," Elena said, grabbing her canvas tote. She stepped into the aisle, face to face with Harrington. Harrington didn't even shift to let her pass. She had to squeeze past him, pressing against the galley wall. "Wipe the seat, Jessica," Harrington called loudly, tossing his briefcase onto the seat Elena had just vacated. "God knows where she's been." Sterling laughed. He actually laughed. "Don't worry, Mr. Harrington. We'll take care of you. First-class service as always." Elena walked down the aisle, the long walk of shame. She passed the business class section, then the partition into economy. The difference was stark. The air was stuffier, the seats smaller. She found row 24. It wasn't even economy plus as promised. It was a middle seat in standard economy, wedged between a man blasting loud music and a mother with a crying baby. Elena sat down, pushing her bag under the seat in front. She took out her phone, hands trembling with anger, with adrenaline. She opened a secure messenger and typed a message to her chief operating officer, Marcus Thorne. "I'm on flight MA 402. Plans changed. Do not, I repeat, do not send the acquisition team to the hotel. Meet me on the tarmac at Heathrow. Bring the full legal team and bring the termination papers for Captain Richard Sterling." She hit send. Then she opened the phone's camera. She discreetly aimed it toward the front of the cabin. Even though first class wasn't visible from here, she needed evidence. Minutes later, the plane taxied to the runway. The PA crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 402 to London. We apologize for the slight delay in departure. We had to resolve a minor passenger issue to ensure the comfort of our priority guests. We are first for takeoff. Sit back, relax, and enjoy Meridian's standard of excellence." Elena put on headphones but left the music off. She sat in the cramped seat, knees pressed against the tray table, and waited. The flight lasted 7 hours. There were 7 hours in which Sterling could dig his own grave deeper. She was going to hand him the shovel. When the plane reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign went off. Service carts rolled down the aisles. Elena watched the flight attendants. Jessica, the same one from the front, was pushing a cart in economy, apparently reassigned to help during the rush. When Jessica reached Elena's row, she offered no drink. She simply leaned in, her voice a sharp whisper. "You're lucky the captain was in a good mood. If it were up to me, you'd be on the no-fly list. Don't press the call button. Don't ask for anything extra. Sit and be quiet." "Understood." Elena looked up, her eyes sharp as flint. "I'll remember that, Jessica. By the way, what's your last name?" "None of your business," Jessica snapped, tossing a small packet of pretzels onto Elena's tray table and moving to the next row. Elena smiled. It was a cold, frightening smile. "Oh, it is very much my business," she whispered to herself. 3 hours into the flight, over the dark, churning Atlantic, the atmosphere in economy had become stifling. The air conditioning seemed to be struggling, leaving the cabin warm with a faint smell of stale coffee and damp coats. Elena shifted in her seat, her back aching. The irony did not escape her. She owned the $300 million aircraft she was flying on, yet here she was squeezed between a stranger's elbow and the wall, unable to feel her left leg. But the physical discomfort was secondary to the growing rage in her chest as she watched the crew. To her right, the young mother she had learned was named Sarah was on the verge of tears. Her 6-month-old baby Leo had been fussy for the last hour. Sarah was exhausted, eyes red, rocking the baby and whispering apologies to the surrounding passengers. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered to Elena, her voice breaking. "He's hungry. I ran out of warm water for the formula. Cold water hurts his tummy. I've pressed the call button 3 times, but," she pointed at the glowing orange light above their row, "it's been on for 45 minutes. Elena unbuckled her seat belt. "I'll handle it." "No, please." "Jessica is horrible," Sarah said, clutching Leo tighter. I don't want to cause trouble. You're not causing trouble, Sarah. You paid for a service. Basic humanity is included in the ticket price, or at least it should be. Elena climbed out of the row and walked to the rear galley. The curtains were drawn, but laughter could be heard behind them. She pulled the curtain aside. Jessica and another flight attendant, a guy named Mark with gelled hair and a bored expression, were leaning against the counter, scrolling phones and eating chocolates from a box clearly labeled first class only. They stopped laughing when they saw Elena. Jessica's face twisted into a scowl. I told you to stay in your seat, Jessica snapped, crumpling a chocolate wrapper and throwing it on the floor. The seatbelt sign is off. But we are on break. The passenger in seat 24B has had her call button on for almost an hour, Elena said, her voice calm but authoritative. She needs warm water for her baby's formula. It's a medical necessity for an infant. Jessica rolled her eyes and glanced at Mark. We are out of warm water back here. The heater's acting up. Tell her to take water from the bathroom tap. Water from the bathroom tap is not potable, Elena said through clenched teeth. You know that. It's not safe for a baby. Listen, lady, Mark cut in, folding his arms. We don't control the plumbing. If she wants premium service, she should have booked a better seat. Now go back and sit down before we write you up for interfering with crew duties. Elena stared at them. She saw laziness, smugness, total lack of empathy. These people represented her brand. Meridian was supposed to be the pinnacle of elegance, yet it was being run like a college dorm at 10,000 meters. There is hot water in first class, Elena stated. I saw the tea service before you threw me out. Go and bring a cup of hot water from the forward galley. Jessica laughed with a harsh, barking sound. You want me to walk through the entire plane, disturb Captain Sterling and Mr. Harrington just to bring water to a screaming economy baby? You're delusional. Sit down right now. Elena didn't move. She stepped into the galley and took a clean paper cup from the stack. Hey, what are you doing? Mark shouted, stepping forward to block her. If you won't do your job, I will, Elena said. I'm going forward for water. Jessica moved faster than Elena expected. She grabbed Elena's arm, her nails digging into the fabric of the hoodie. You are not going up there. Captain Sterling gave clear instructions. No riffraff in the forward cabin. Stay behind that curtain or we will restrain you. Do you understand? Plastic zip ties, right here in the galley. Elena looked at Jessica's hand on her arm. Let go of me. Sit down, Jessica hissed. Elena jerked her arm free with a sharp motion. She looked at both of them, memorizing faces and badge numbers. She understood that forcing her way forward now would likely lead to a physical confrontation, and Sterling would use it as pretext to turn the plane around or arrest her before she could execute her plan. She had to be smarter. Fine, Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I'll sit. But remember this moment. Remember that you refused water to a baby. She took a bottle of room temperature water from the cart, ignoring Mark's protest, and turned around. She returned to seat 24B. They didn't give it to you? Sarah asked with resignation. Here, Elena said, handing her the bottle. I'm sorry. Hold the bottle under your arm for a few minutes. Body heat will warm it enough to mix the formula. It's the best we can do right now. Sarah looked at Elena with gratitude in tear-filled eyes. Thank you. You're very kind. I don't understand why they treat you so cruelly. They think they have power, Elena said, staring at the seat back in front of her. They think because they have uniforms and badges they are more than you. But power is a funny thing, Sarah. It can disappear in a second. Elena took out her phone again. She opened the Notes app and started a new entry. Entry 3. Crew negligence. Water denied to infant. Threat of physical restraint for requesting basic supplies. Flight attendants Jessica Miller and Mark Davis subject to immediate termination upon landing. She closed her eyes, trying to rest, but the image of Harrington in her seat, laughing while that mother suffered, burned in her mind. Retribution was coming. She just had to wait until the wheels came down. 2 hours before landing, the dynamic on board shifted from uncomfortable to explosive. Charles Harrington, the person in seat 1A, had apparently taken full advantage of the unlimited premium whiskey. His loud, booming laugh had been coming from the first-class cabin for hours. piercing the thin curtain that separated the classes. But now he moved. Elena was reading a book on her phone when the business class curtain was yanked open. Harrington stumbled through, half-empty glass of amber liquid in his hand. Tie loosened, face purple and blotchy. He wasn't heading anywhere specific. He was wandering. Legs fell asleep, he announced to no one in particular, speech slightly slurred. Gotta walk around and see how the other half lives. He swayed down the economy aisle, bumping shoulders and seatbacks. He didn't apologize, just chuckled. When he reached row 24 he stopped. He leaned forward, squinting until his gaze locked on Elena. Well, Harrington grinned, heavily leaning on the headrest of the seat in front of her and waking the sleeping teenager there. If it isn't our little ticketless seat thief. Elena didn't look up from her phone. Return to your seat, Mr. Harrington. You're drunk. Drunk. Harrington laughed, spilling a little of his drink on the floor. I'm celebrating. I just closed a deal worth more than everyone on this plane combined will earn in their lifetimes. I can be as drunk as I want. This city belongs to me. This airline practically belongs to me. Nothing belongs to you, Elena said, finally raising her eyes. Her gaze was steady and piercing. You are a passenger like any other. Harrington's smile vanished. He leaned closer, his breath reeking of alcohol. You've got a big mouth, girl. I don't like that. You know, I did Richard a favor by not throwing you off in New York. I could snap my fingers and you'd be on the airline's blacklist. At that moment baby Leo whimpered softly. The sound instantly irritated Harrington and he glared at Sarah. Shut that thing up, he barked. I'm trying to have a conversation. Sarah shrank back, terrified. I'm sorry, sir. Do not apologize to him, Elena said firmly, unbuckling her seat belt and standing. She was short, but in that aisle she stood like a tower. She positioned herself between Harrington and the mother. Mr. Harrington, you are harassing passengers. Return to your seat immediately. Or what? Harrington challenged, invading her personal space. You gonna make me? You and your cheap store hoodie? Is there a problem here? The voice came from behind Harrington. It was Captain Sterling. He had come out of the cockpit, probably alerted by Jessica that the important guest was roaming. Sterling assessed the scene. The swaying, aggressive Harrington, the resolute Elena, the terrified mother. A competent captain would have handled the drunk passenger situation correctly. Sterling, however, did the opposite. Is she bothering you, Mr. Harrington? Sterling asked, placing a calming hand on the drunk man's shoulder. She's threatening me, Richard, Harrington lied, pointing a trembling finger at Elena. I came back here to use the toilet because the forward one is occupied. She started yelling at me. Verbal assault. I feel in danger. It was such a blatant lie it was almost funny, but truth didn't matter to Sterling. What mattered was the man who had promised to put in a good word with the regional director. Sterling turned on Elena, his face twisted with rage. I warned you. I specifically told you not to cause problems. He is drunk and harassing a mother with a child, Elena said, her voice clear and ringing through the silent cabin. He poses a safety threat. By law, you are required to restrain an intoxicated passenger who is threatening others. Do your job, Captain. The entire economy was now watching. Phones were raised, cameras recording. Sterling saw the phones. His arrogance blinded him to the danger. He considered himself untouchable. He stepped closer to Elena, towering over her. Don't tell me how to do my job, Sterling hissed. You have been nothing but a nuisance since the moment you stepped onto this aircraft. You refused a direct order to move, you tried to enter service areas, and now you are assaulting an important guest. Assaulting? Elena raised an eyebrow. I never touched him. It's your word against his, Sterling said, and a cruel smirk played on his lips. And his word is gold. Yours is worthless. Sterling pulled plastic zip ties from his pocket. He had clearly brought them anticipating conflict. Turn around, Sterling ordered. I am detaining you for interfering with crew duties and creating a threat to flight safety. The cabin gasped. You are making a mistake, Elena said quietly. She did not resist, but she did not turn either. A mistake that will end your career. Turn around. Sterling roared, grabbing her shoulder and spinning her. He twisted her arms behind her back and cinched the zip ties tight. The plastic bit into her skin. "Jessica!" Sterling shouted. Jessica appeared instantly, looking triumphant. "Escort, mister." Harrington back to first class. "Bring him another drink on the house," Sterling ordered. Then he shoved Elena back into her seat. "As for you, stay right here. I'm radioing the police at Heathrow. They will be waiting at the gate. You are going straight to a cell." Harrington laughed as he was led away. "Enjoy prison, sweetheart. Maybe they'll give you a better outfit there." Sterling leaned in one last time, his face inches from Elena's. "You messed with the wrong person. You are nobody. Remember that." He turned and marched back to the cockpit, yanking the curtain shut. Elena sat in the cramped seat, hands bound behind her, shoulders aching, humiliation burning her skin. Sarah cried softly beside her, terrified. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. "This is all my fault." Elena took a deep breath, forcing her heartbeat to slow. She looked at Sarah and gave her a small, calm smile. "It is not your fault, Sarah. And don't worry about me." Elena glanced at the seat back where she had hidden her phone. It was still recording. "He thinks he called the police over the radio," Elena murmured more to herself than to anyone. But in reality he just called his own executioner. She shifted position, wincing as the zip ties cut deeper. Only about 90 minutes of this nightmare left to endure. But when those doors opened at Heathrow, the balance of power would shift so dramatically that Captain Sterling wouldn't even know what hit him until the ground rushed up to meet him. "Just wait," she murmured. "Just wait." The descent into Heathrow was turbulent. The plane shook through layers of thick grey clouds that seemed to mirror the mood inside the cabin. For the last 90 minutes of the flight, Elena Vance sat in silence, hands still tightly bound behind her with plastic ties. Circulation in her thumbs was beginning to fail. A sharp tingling crept up her arms. But she refused to complain. She refused to give Captain Sterling the satisfaction of hearing her. Beside her, Sarah had finally calmed Leo. The young mother trembled with anxiety, glancing repeatedly at Elena's bound wrists, then at the call button, terrified the crew might return. "You don't deserve this," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. "I recorded everything. I recorded everything he said to you. If you need a witness, I'll give them the video." Elena turned her head and gave her a tired but sincere smile. "Keep that video. You might turn out to be the most important person on this plane when we land." The intercom sounded. Captain Sterling's voice filled the cabin, flat and dangerously confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final approach into London Heathrow Airport. We expect to be on the ground in 15 minutes. I would like to apologize once again for the incident in the economy cabin. At Meridian, safety is our top priority, and we have zero tolerance for disruptive passengers who threaten our valued guests. Local authorities have been notified and will meet the aircraft to handle the situation. Please remain seated until the fasten seatbelt sign is turned off." A murmur rolled through economy. People craned their necks to look at Elena. Some glances were sympathetic. These people recognized the injustice they had witnessed. Others, those who had not seen the confrontation, looked at her with suspicion, believing the captain's version that the small woman in the hoodie had been a threat. When the wheels touched the wet asphalt with a squeal of rubber, Elena felt a strange calm settle over her. The game was almost over. The plane taxied what felt like forever. Normally first-class passengers would be jumping up and gathering belongings before the aircraft had fully stopped. Today the crew blocked the aisles. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated," Jessica announced, standing at the front of the economy section like a prison guard. "We are waiting for the police who will board to escort a passenger." Through the window Elena saw flashing blue lights of police cars reflecting off the wet pavement. But behind the cars she saw something else. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows parked right at the jet bridge. Sterling clearly hadn't noticed the SUVs. He only saw the police. The cabin door opened. 2 Metropolitan Police officers boarded, their yellow high-visibility vests standing out sharply against the muted tones of the interior. Captain Sterling was right there to greet them, cap tucked under his arm, chest puffed out. "Officers," Sterling said, shaking the senior officer's hand. "Thank you for coming so quickly. The suspect is in seat 24B. I already have her restrained. She behaved abusively, threatened a high-profile client, and refused to follow crew instructions. I want to press full charges for endangering flight safety. Understood, Captain, the officer said, his face professional and stern. We'll remove her immediately. Sterling led the officers down the aisle, past business-class passengers watching with morbid curiosity. When they reached row 24, Sterling pointed with a gloved finger at Elena. There she is, he said, voice dripping with contempt. Get her off my plane. The officer looked at Elena. He saw a small, exhausted woman in a hoodie with her hands bound behind her back. He looked at Sarah clutching her child. It did not look like the scene of a violent crime, but the captain's words were law in the air. The officer said, reaching toward Elena. You are under arrest. Come with us without resistance. Elena stood, legs numb. She did not resist. She let the officers guide her into the aisle. As she passed the front of the plane, she walked by Harrington in seat 1A. He was packing his things, looking smug. Bye-bye, troublemaker, Harrington called mockingly, raising a glass of champagne in a sarcastic toast. Hope you enjoy prison food. Sterling stood at the entrance door, arms crossed, the victor surveying his prize. As Elena passed him, he leaned in one last time. I told you, he whispered, his eyes cold and dead. You are nobody. I am the captain. Never forget your place. Elena stopped. She looked Sterling straight in the eyes. I won't forget. And neither will you. The officers pushed her forward, out of the plane into the jet bridge. The cold London air hit her face, a sharp contrast to the stale cabin. They led her down the metal stairs to a waiting police car. Sterling followed, eager to see her shoved into the back of the patrol vehicle. He stood at the top of the stairs, watching, savoring the moment. But when they reached the tarmac, the rear door of the lead black SUV opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than Sterling's annual salary, moving with the predatory grace of a shark. It was Marcus Thorne, Chief Operating Officer of Vance Global. Behind him stood two more men, the conglomerate's senior legal counsel. Thorne did not look at the police. He looked straight at Elena. His face paled when he saw the zip ties on her wrists. Stop! Thorne roared, his voice like thunder rolling across the noisy tarmac. The policeman froze, startled by the authority in this man's voice. Who are you? The senior officer asked. Thorne ignored him. He walked straight to Elena. My God. He turned to the policeman, eyes blazing. You have exactly 3 seconds to remove those ties from her wrists before I take your badge and file a lawsuit against your department that will bankrupt this station. The officer blinked. Sir, she is a suspect in an incident related to flight safety. Captain Sterling ordered her detention. Captain Sterling, Thorne spat the name as if it were a hired employee. He pointed at Elena. She is the owner of the airline. Silence fell over the tarmac, heavier than the fog. The policeman looked at Thorne, then down at Elena in her worn hoodie, then back at Thorne. Owner. Remove them. Elena said her voice was no longer quiet. It was the voice that commanded boardrooms on 3 continents. The officer hesitated, then pulled out a multi-tool and cut through the plastic ties. Elena rubbed her wrists where angry red welts remained. She winced, but the pain only sharpened her focus. Up on the metal stairs of the jet bridge, Captain Sterling watched the unfolding scene in confusion. He couldn't hear what was being said, but he saw the police release her, saw the man in the suit bow his head to her. What's going on down there? Sterling shouted from the stairs. Officer, why are you releasing her? I told you to arrest her. Elena looked up at the stairs. She straightened her hoodie, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the steps. Thorne and the legal team followed in formation, a phalanx of power. Mr. Thorne, Elena said without turning. Bring the termination papers. They're ready, Thorne answered. Elena climbed the stairs straight to where Sterling stood. The captain looked bewildered, his bravado cracking for the first time. What do you think you're doing? Sterling demanded as she reached the top platform. Get back to the police car. Elena ignored him. She walked past him back onto the plane. Excuse me, Sterling roared, grabbing for her shoulder. Thorne intercepted his hand before it could touch Elena again. Thorne's grip was iron. Touch her one more time and you will leave this airport on a stretcher. Do you understand? Sterling staggered back, stunned. Who the hell are you? I'm the man who signs your paychecks, Thorne said. Or signed. Elena stepped into the first-class cabin. Harrington was still there, trying to close his bag, irritated by the delay. Jessica and Mark stood at the galley counter, staring out the window, confused by the commotion. Elena positioned herself at the front of the cabin. She turned to face the crew and first-class passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena announced, her voice soft but demanding absolute silence. "May I have your attention, please?" Harrington looked up, his face flushing. "You again? Why aren't you in cuffs?" "Because," Elena said, looking at him with a mixture of pity and disgust, "you cannot arrest the person who owns the plane." Harrington froze. "What?" Elena reached into her bag, the same canvas tote Sterling had mocked, and pulled out an elegant black leather folder. She opened it and held up the acquisition documents, stamped with official seals from the Aviation Authority. "My name is Elena Vance," she said, CEO of Vance Global and, as of 3 weeks ago, the new owner of Meridian Air. You could have heard a pin drop. Jessica's face went white. She clutched the galley counter to keep from falling. Mark dropped the magazine he was holding. Sterling, who had followed them back on board, stood in the doorway with his jaw hanging open. "No. It's you in the hoodie." "Yes," Elena said, turning her gaze on him. "I wanted to see how my employees treat people when they think no one important is watching. I found out." She walked towards Sterling. The height difference no longer mattered. She towered over him emotionally. "Captain Richard Sterling," she said, her voice flat and cold. "You violated federal aviation regulations by removing a seated passenger without sufficient cause. You failed to intervene when a passenger harassed a mother with a child. You falsified a police report claiming I was aggressive. And you physically assaulted your employer." Sterling began to stammer, sweat beading on his forehead. "Ms. Vance, I didn't know." "If I had known it was you, that is exactly the point," Elena cried, her voice finally cracking under the fury she had held back for 7 hours. "If you had known it was me, you would have treated me like a queen. But because you decided I was poor, because you decided I was weak, you treated me like garbage. You judged a book by its cover and burned the entire library." She extended her hand. Thorne placed a document in it. "This is the official notice of termination," Elena said, pressing the paper against Sterling's chest. "You are fired effective immediately. You lose your rank. You will not fly for Meridian Air. I will personally ensure that the report I file with the Federal Aviation Administration regarding your conduct today makes it impossible for you to ever sit in a pilot seat again." Sterling stared at the paper, hand shaking. You can't do this. I have 20 years of service." "Get off my plane," Elena said quietly. "But then, get off my plane," she shouted. Sterling flinched. He looked around the cabin. His crew averted their eyes. Passengers watched. He was exposed. He turned, clutching the termination notice, and walked down the jet bridge, shoulders slumped, a broken man. Elena turned to the galley counter. Jessica was now crying, mascara running down her cheeks. Mark stared at his boots. Jessica Miller. Mark Davis. Elena listed their names from memory. "You denied water to a hungry infant. You mocked passengers. You abused your power because you were too lazy to do your jobs. Please, Ms. Vance," Jessica sobbed. "I need this job. I have rent." Sarah in seat 24B needed water, Elena countered. She needed help. You gave her contempt. Hand over your wings. Ms. Vance the wings. Now. Trembling, Jessica and Mark unpinned their wings and handed them over. "Escort them out," Elena said. "Make sure they take no company property." Finally, Elena turned to seat 1A. Charles Harrington had gone pale, but his arrogance had not entirely evaporated. He tried to joke. "Well, Ms. Vance, quite the performance. Listen, I'm a businessman. I understand stress. Maybe I had a little too much to drink. Let's not let this affect the contract between our companies." Elena smiled. It was the most terrifying look anyone had ever seen on her face. "Mr. Harrington, you know why I was flying to London. I was flying to sign the final supply chain agreement with Harrington Logistics." Harrington's eyes widened. Yes, exactly. The 100 million contract. "We are partners." "Not anymore," Elena said. She took out her phone and dialed on speaker. Connect me to legal, she said. Yes. Cancel the deal with Harrington. Activate the morals clause. The CEO has just publicly disgraced himself and harassed passengers on a Meridian flight. I want the contract terminated. Understood. MS. Vance. Done immediately. Harrington jumped up in panic. You can't do that. It is the deal. My company's entire third quarter forecast. You should have thought about that before you demanded my seat, Elena said. You wanted to know how the other half lives, Charles. Well, now you will, because without this deal you'll be flying economy a lot more often. She pointed at the door. Out. Harrington grabbed his bag, muttering protests, but Thorne stepped forward looking ready to physically throw him out. Harrington fled. Silence fell over the cabin. Elena took a deep breath. She smoothed her hoodie. She walked back through the curtain, past business class, back into economy. Passengers looked at her with awe. She stopped at row 24. Sarah looked up at her, eyes wide. You own the airline? Elena smiled, and this time the smile was warm. Yes. I'm going to change a few things, starting with you. She took a business card from her pocket. Sarah, I'm refunding the cost of your ticket and giving you and your son lifetime first-class passes on Meridian Air. No one will ever treat you like that again. Sarah burst into tears. Thank you so much. Elena scanned the cabin. And for everyone else in economy, drinks are on the house while we wait for the new crew to arrive. Sorry for the delay. The cabin erupted in applause. Elena returned to the front of the plane and finally sat down in seat 1A. She looked out the window at the rain. She was exhausted, her wrists hurt, her head was pounding. But watching Sterling's figure walking alone across the tarmac below in the rain, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Karma had arrived, and it was flying first class. The repercussions of Flight MA 402 did not end on the Heathrow tarmac. In the internet age, nothing stays unnoticed for long, especially when a billionaire CEO dismantles a tyrant in real time. 3 days after the incident, the video Sarah had secretly recorded from seat 24B reached the press. Pilot tries to arrest woman for defending a child. Turns out she owns the airline. The video racked up 40 million views in 48 hours. The entire world watched in crystal clear high definition as Captain Richard Sterling sneered contemptuously at the woman in the hoodie, put plastic ties on her without cause, and then watched his career collapse in seconds when Marcus Thorne stepped out of that black SUV. The clip of Elena shouting, "Get off my plane," became a global battle cry, a meme, and a symbol of justice against corporate abuse. But for the men involved, it was not a meme. It was an avalanche. Richard Sterling sat in the cramped waiting room of a regional cargo company in a grey industrial town far from glamorous international flights. The leather seats and gold-trimmed cabins of the Meridian 777 were a distant memory. Now he was surrounded by peeling paint and the smell of stale cigarette smoke. He adjusted his tie, which felt too tight. Last month he had sold his Rolex to pay the mortgage. His wife had left him 2 weeks after the video went viral, unable to bear the public shame and sudden loss of income. The Pilot of the Year trophy he had once proudly displayed on the mantel now lay in a cardboard box in a storage unit he could barely afford. Mr. Sterling, a young man with a tablet called. He did not use Captain. Sterling forced a smile. Yes, that's me. He stepped into the small office. The hiring manager, a gruff man named Henderson, had Sterling's RSUM on the desk. He also had a tablet open playing the video. Sterling recognized the sound immediately. It was his own voice shouting at Elena. Henderson looked up, his expression blank. You have thousands of flight hours, Sterling. You're rated for heavy aircraft. Technically, you're overqualified to haul boxes of frozen fish to Norway in a prop plane. I just want to fly, Mr. Henderson, Sterling said in a humble voice stripped of its former booming arrogance. I'm willing to start at the bottom. The problem is, Henderson said, tapping the tablet screen, we are a small company. We rely on trust. The Federal Aviation Administration report on your license is bad. Sterling. Gross abuse of authority. Creation of threat to passengers. Aviation authorities have suspended your commercial pilot license, and even now when you apply for cargo work no one wants to take on that liability. Henderson closed the folder. I can't hire you. My insurers won't allow it. And honestly, after seeing how you treated that mother and child, I don't want you in my sky. Sterling sat there as the rejection hit him like a physical blow. Please. I have nothing left. You should have thought about that before you put those ties on her, Henderson said, echoing Elena's words. Good luck, Mr. Sterling. You can find the exit yourself. Sterling stepped out into pouring rain onto the parking lot. Overhead a Meridian jet roared past, gaining altitude and disappearing into the clouds, heading for a destination he would never see again. He followed it with his eyes, and the realization finally hit him. His wings had been clipped forever. On the other side of the ocean in New York, karma struck Charles Harrington with financial brutality. When Elena Vance terminated the contract with Harrington Logistics, it triggered a domino effect. The morals clause she invoked was public. Investors, frightened by the sudden loss of their largest client and the viral video of the drunk CEO harassing a woman, began dumping shares. Harrington tried to minimize the damage. He went on talk shows claiming the video had been edited, that he was the victim. It backfired spectacularly. Every time he opened his mouth, the stock fell further. 2 months after the flight, the board called an emergency meeting. Harrington entered the boardroom expecting to intimidate and dominate them as he always had. Instead, he found silence. Charles, the chairman said without looking him in the eye. We voted. You're fired. You can't fire me, Harrington roared, slamming his fist on the table. I built this company. And you destroyed its reputation in a single flight, the chairman replied calmly. We are filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection for restructuring. The first step of that restructuring is your removal. Security is waiting to escort you out. Harrington was led from his own building, past employees he had screamed at for years. None of them looked sorry to see him go. Standing on the sidewalk clutching a box of personal items, he was splashed by dirty water from a puddle kicked up by a passing taxi. He looked around for someone to shout at, but there was no one left who cared about his shouting. While the villains of this story met their downfall, Elena Vance was busy rebuilding. She didn't just fire the bad apples. She replanted the entire orchard. She completely rebuilt Meridian Air's training program. The new motto, hung on the walls of headquarters, was simple. Humanity first. Service training now included mandatory empathy seminars. The culture of privileges for the select few was abolished. First class remained luxurious, but the rule was strict. Every passenger, from seat 1A to 34, was a guest who deserved respect. 1 year later, Elena stood in a hangar at Kennedy Airport ready to christen the newest aircraft in the fleet. It was a beautiful, gleaming liner. A crowd of employees and journalists had gathered. Elena took the microphone. Today she was not wearing a hoodie. She wore an elegant business suit, but the same worn sneakers she had worn on that fateful flight, a reminder to stay grounded. A year ago we received a hard lesson, Elena told the crowd. We learned that character is revealed not when we are comfortable, but when we think we have power over others. We are building an airline where kindness is the currency. She pointed into the crowd. I would like to introduce our new Director of Customer Experience, who will ensure no passenger is ever left unheard again. Sarah stepped onto the stage. The young mother from seat 24B looked different. Confident, smiling, radiating strength that a year earlier had been hidden behind fear. She held the hand of her toddler Leo, who was now walking. Elena had kept her promise. She hadn't just refunded Sarah the ticket price. She had given her a job. The social work education Sarah had mentioned in their post-flight correspondence had made her the perfect candidate to reform the passenger rights department. Thank you, Elena, Sarah said into the microphone, voice confident. And thank you all. We will fly higher, not just in altitude, but in standards. The crowd applauded. Elena looked at Sarah, then down at little Leo waving a toy airplane. It was the perfect ending. The arrogance of men like Sterling and Harrington had been their undoing, crushed under the weight of their own egos. But from the wreckage something better had been built. A legacy not of money, but of respect. Elena looked at the sky. It was clear and blue. Clearance for takeoff granted, she murmured. And this is the incredible story of how one arrogant pilot and one rude billionaire lost everything because they judged a book by its cover. It is a powerful reminder that true status is not defined by the seat you sit in, the clothes you wear, or the title on your badge. It is defined by how you treat people when you think you have nothing to gain from them. Elena Vance didn't just win. She changed the rules of the game entirely. If this story satisfied your thirst for justice, please hit the like button. It helps the channel grow a lot and lets me know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs a reminder to stay humble, and subscribe so you don't miss new releases. I want to know what you think.